GOA is fighting back against Mexico. We just filed an amicus brief in the case of Mexico v. Smith & Wesson. In this case, the country of Mexico is suing U.S. small arms companies in the most recent attempt to circumvent the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. Of course, they're supported by veterans of the gun control industrial complex. And today, we're going to discuss the case and our amicus brief to the Supreme Court. I'm Phil, and you're watching Law and Ammo. But before we get into the video, let me take a second to tell you about GOA's alerts. Now more than ever, we need to be vigilant in standing up for the Second Amendment. Just because Republicans control all three branches of government doesn't mean that we don't need to hold them accountable to the promises that they've made and the Constitution. Signing up for GOA's alerts will help you do just that. We'll keep you up to date on all the fights happening that affect you from the federal level all the way down to the state and local levels. So sign up today at gunowners.org. Now back to the video. The Mexican government brought a lawsuit against several U.S. gun manufacturers in federal court. And their reasoning? The business practices of these manufacturers facilitated illegal gun trafficking to Mexican drug cartels, causing irreparable harm to Mexico and its citizens. Mexico claims that 2.2% of the 40 million firearms manufactured annually in the U.S. are smuggled into Mexico. But nobody tell Mexico about Operation Fast and Furious while we're at it. Or the fact that the ATF would rather harass law-abiding gun owners on this side of the border than actually stop trafficking on it.
We need to just abolish the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in the first place. Why does it exist if it's not preventing the gun running on the southern border by the drug cartels, but it's spying on American citizens exercising their constitutional rights?
And in return, Mexico is seeking $10 billion in damages. The companies sued are Smith & Wesson, Barrett, Beretta, Glock, Ruger, Interstate Arms, Century Arms, and Colt. The case itself was filed August 4th, 2021 in the Federal District Court for the District of Massachusetts. They were assigned Judge Dennis Saylor, a George W. Bush appointee. But Mexico didn't file this case all on its own. It had support from an organization called Global Action on Gun Violence. GAGV was founded by ex-Brady Chief Counsel and VP of Legal, Jonathan Lowy. Lowy's a gun control veteran. He was with Brady for almost 25 years, and since founding GAGV, has continued to litigate against firearms manufacturers. The main target of GAGV's suits seems to be PLCAA, or the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. PLCAA, passed in 2005, is a law that protects firearms manufacturers and dealers from liability when crimes are committed with their products. But it's not a total liability shield, and it's certainly not unique in just the firearm space. In fact, vaccine manufacturers enjoy very wide protections from lawsuits as well, thanks to the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. Also, internet companies enjoy a very wide protection from defamation lawsuits thanks to Section 230, which you may have heard about. It makes sense. Would you sue a car manufacturer for the actions of a drunk driver? Or a knife manufacturer for the actions of a stabbing? Just ask Bernie Sanders, someone who's not a fan of firearms.
Virtually every campaign that I have been in where the NRA and the gun folks have had a position, they voted and supported, opposed me. In fact, I have about a D- record from the NRA. Now, the issues that you're talking about is if somebody has a gun and it falls into the hands of a murderer and that murderer kills somebody with the gun, do you hold the gun manufacturer responsible? Not any more than you would hold a hammer company responsible if somebody beats somebody over the head with a hammer. That is not what a lawsuit should be about. And this is part, by the way, I may say, of, folks who do not like guns is fine. But we have millions of people who are gun owners in this country. 99.9% of those people obey the law. I want to see real serious debate and action on guns. But it is not going to take place if we simply have extreme positions on both sides. I think I can bring us to the middle.
PLCAA was enacted in response to an overwhelming number of lawsuits from anti-gun politicians and states that were being used to demand that firearms manufacturers implement the anti-gun lobby's wish list. Of course, gun control groups want to overturn PLCAA, as public opinion on gun control has soured over the years. Since the 1990s, Congress has become less willing to implement the will of Michael Bloomberg and those who could afford private security. Plus, the issue has become hyper-partisan, with support for gun control dropping among independents and Republicans, but rising to nearly 91% with Democrats. And here's more. Gallup also reports that Democrats have a higher trust in the corporate media, which constantly advocates for gun control. Maybe the stats are related. Regardless, on September 30th, 2022, Mexico's lawsuit against the firearms manufacturers was dismissed by Judge Saylor. Judge Saylor, in his opinion, almost seemed like he didn't want to make the ruling, writing, "Unfortunately for the government of Mexico, all of its claims are either barred by federal law or fail for other reasons. The PLCAA unequivocally bars lawsuits seeking to hold gun manufacturers responsible for the acts of individuals using guns for their intended purpose. And while the statute contains several narrow exceptions, none are applicable here. The court does not have the authority to ignore an act of Congress, nor is its proper role to devise stratagems to avoid statutory commands, even where the allegations of a complaint may evoke a sympathetic response. And while the court has considerable sympathy for the people of Mexico, and none whatsoever for those who traffic guns to Mexican criminal organizations, it is duty-bound to follow the law." The law Judge Saylor is referring to, of course, is PLCAA. Mexico then appealed to the First Circuit. They were assigned a panel of 3 judges: William J. Callada Jr., an Obama appointee, Gustavo Antonio Gelpi Jr., a Joe Biden appointee, and Lara Elizabeth Montecalvo, another Joe Biden appointee. The case was litigated for over a year, but finally, on January 26, 2024, the panel of 3 judges on the First Circuit reversed the lower court's decision. They decided that Mexico did have standing to sue, regardless of PLCAA. So how did this happen? The First Circuit panel found that the lawsuit plausibly alleges a type of claim that is statutorily exempt from PLCAA's general prohibition. The panel also goes on to say that U.S. manufacturers are producing weapons of war specifically to target illegal sales to Mexico, marketing straight to the cartels. They also accuse the U.S. manufacturers of foregoing safety features, such as technology that would only allow recognized users to fire the gun, something that doesn't currently exist. In response, on April 18, 2024, the gun makers petitioned the Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari. In the writ of cert, the gun manufacturers presented 2 questions: whether the production and sale of firearms in the United States is the proximate cause of alleged injuries to the Mexican government stemming from violence committed by drug cartels in Mexico; whether the production and sale of firearms in the United States amounts to aiding and abetting illegal firearms trafficking because firearms companies allegedly know that some of their products are unlawfully trafficked. Here's a great quote from the writ. The First Circuit's aiding and abetting holding is just as bad. The court held that America's firearms industry has plausibly been aiding and abetting Mexico's cartels for decades, without a single U.S. governmental entity doing a thing about it in this otherwise heavily regulated industry. That ruling has no basis in law. GOA agrees. And it seems that the Supreme Court sees this as an important question to answer, because on October 4th, 2024, SCOTUS granted the petition. With the case now headed to the Supreme Court, we at GOA knew that we needed to support this fight against the anti-gun lobby's constant attacks on PLCAA. If PLCAA is overturned, the anti-gunners will use lawfare to bankrupt firearms manufacturers by tying them up in frivolous lawsuits forever. This was the stated goal of Second Amendment haters like Eliot Spitzer in the 90s, and it continues to be the same today. So that's why we just filed our amicus brief to the Supreme Court. In our amicus, we argue a few different points. First, Mexico is seeking to make the United States pay for the consequences of its own failure to control crime and allow its citizens to have arms for self-defense. Second, firearms crossing the border into Mexico have more to do with a failure of Mexico's ability to control crime and bad U.S. government policy like the Obama ATF's Operation Fast and Furious, rather than the fault of U.S. firearms industry. Third, we cite that Mexican cartel violence can be traced to so many other factors unrelated to the American firearms industry. The Mexican government is ranked as being one of the most corrupt countries in the world. This is only heightened by the many stories of Mexican government officials working hand in hand with cartels to facilitate their illicit activities. Very recently, on October 16, 2024, the former highest-ranking law enforcement official in Mexico was sentenced to 38 years in prison in the U.S. for taking millions of dollars in bribes and enabling transportation of over 1 million kilos of cocaine into the U.S. If the highest-ranking law enforcement official in Mexico is in bed with the cartel, who knows what else is going on? And finally, we defend PLCAA as being enacted to protect the Second Amendment. The anti-gun forces in America understand that the punishment is the process. The cost of defense can be just as crippling to gun rights as the judgment that could come from the end of a litigation. Suppose the plaintiff was successful in obtaining the requested $10 billion judgment. What would be the result constitutionally? It would cause the bankruptcy of some of the largest gun manufacturers in the country and force the remaining manufacturers to close their doors rather than face a second round of litigation. And of course, the fact that PLCAA was enacted has stopped these activist lawyers in their quest to destroy the Second Amendment by whatever means necessary. Clearly, the PLCAA closed the courthouse doors to the federal government, states, municipalities, private interest groups, and others, including Mexico, which would seek to impose liability on lawful commerce for the remote illegal acts of third parties. This court should follow PLCAA's mandate and dismiss this action so it can protect the Second Amendment rights of Americans. Now that's a slam dunk as far as we're concerned. So we're excited to see what the Supreme Court has to say, and we'll keep you updated as the case progresses. Thanks for watching.